Our next speaker is from BIAD, Colette Jeffrey, and she's going to take us through, I think, one of her PhD research projects. Is that correct?
Can't hear you.
Very exciting one.
Can't hear you.
All right, I am a part-time researcher, a full-time lecturer, and information designer and many other things. I think that's what makes research interesting, that keeps us busy. And the focus of my research, you'll get a sense of it, it's very different to what we've just seen. It's why people get lost. How many people got lost getting here today? Hands up. Yay! The signs work, or not, or something. We'll talk a bit more about that. So what I'm going to talk about is animal wayfinding. It's always good to look outside of what you're actually doing to see what else other people are doing, in this case animals, why people get lost, and also going back to what I've been doing for the last 15 years is I'm an information designer, a wayfinding designer, so looking at how our industry can benefit from academic research that I'm able to do now. So, are we similar to animals? Looking at them, not that similar to most of them. But how they find their way is potentially a source of interest for me, trying to think how we can be more creative beyond signs and maps for people to navigate around environments. The classic one I've done 30 hospital sites, and I used to say to them, you don't want people finding their way via smell. That is not a good process in healthcare. Coffee shop, maybe. Coffee's nice. We like to find coffee shops through the sense of smell. Ants, there's lots and lots of studies, wayfinding studies on ants. And I'm realising now it's because they're easy to follow. They're easy to watch, they keep coming back, they're very small, you can displace them. And the things that are being found out by them, by the research, is that they use the moon, they use landmarks, they use colour, people use landmarks, people use colour. They're easy to observe. And one of the things I'm getting from the ants is that I'm going to displace people and see what happens, like they do with ants. They displace them and then they see what happens and how they find their way back. And there's interesting things where they have routes, they have set routes that they want to use. So there's some sort of things that I can learn from ant behaviour. And I love this. Yes, ants navigate fundamentally the same way as humans because we're central place foragers. Okay, I'll be thinking more about that, I think, over the course of the next 6 years. And the other ones that are really interesting to look at is honeybees. Again, they keep coming back to where they went, but they have a really interesting behaviour that has been studied for many, many years. There's even somebody got a Nobel Prize for his research into honeybees. And again, we're seeing smell, we're seeing the sun or the moon, we're seeing that they have some sort of internal clock. And the really interesting one is they're recognising patterns of where they want to go or where in their case, the food is. And so there's this other really interesting aspect of bees where they have a dance that they do to direct people. So I'm seeing this a bit like getting given spoken directions. This is their way of giving directions to other bees in the hive, tell them where the food is. And there's been lots of research. This Von Fisch in 1973 was finding out this thing. And then it's obviously been looked at in even more detail and discovered that depending on which direction they're facing when they do the waggle dance and then which way they go in a circular movement determines which way they should go and how far they should go to find food. Really interesting communication. I'm a designer as well, and what I'm finding is that the research that I'm doing is really feeding into my creative thinking, finding better places to look for other ideas. This is a classic example of naming of beers coming from research into honey. It's a honey beer and all of this sort of stuff. So there's added benefits to this research that I'm doing. One other animal I'm just going to mention is homing pigeons. Again, they keep coming back, but they're very clever. How can you just get released and then find your way home randomly? There's a really interesting navigation thing going on. Again, the sense of smell, the use of the sun. And this is a really interesting one that I'm going to explore, is putting magnets on people. See if it has an effect. Are we magnetic? Our compasses are magnetic. If I put a magnet on you, do you get disorientated? Excuse me. And then the other thing that I'm finding with research is as the more you do, the more you find that the more recent stuff is then alluding to the older. You know, sort of 20 years ago we thought this, now we're thinking it's about a low frequency sound that's being emitted, and so the thinking goes on. And what I'm finding is from looking at all this animal navigation, I'm realising that they are using multiple sources, just like humans are using, which is what I knew about humans, and it's looking at how they're using different environmental features. So what's clever about humans is that we navigate in very different environments, urban settings, rural settings, underwater, on the slopes, and we do it in very, very different ways, and my research is looking at how people navigate in different ways, and trying to get some sense, see some patterns, see some strategies into it. 15 years ago, I wrote this book, Wayfinding, NHS, how to do it in hospitals. It's full of good practice guidelines. We know how to do this. And then I've come here 3 years in going, okay, maybe science isn't the way, but you told us. Yeah, I know. So I've given this similar presentation to the Sign Design Society. Yes, it exists. I've been a director of it for some years. We all sit around, we have a chat about sign design, wayfinding, and so I've been designing, they know I've been designing these. Like I say, I've done over 30 hospitals, Natural History Museum, wonderful places that I've been sent to tell people why people are getting lost. They pay people to do that. It's a great profession. I do still love it. It's great. But I'm now wondering, can they really keep it up to date? So if anybody saw me speak at the 2010 RESCON conference when I first arrived here, why people get lost in hospitals, why the signs won't ever work, I still firmly believe science can never work in a very complex environment like a university, like a hospital, where it's constantly changing. People are moving all the time. So I'm now humbled. I'm humbled by my lack of knowledge. Having been paid for 15 years to be the expert that goes in and tells people why, I'm now questioning that, and I'm trying to look for the evidence. And my heart sank when I found this book, Why People Get Lost. Oh no. And it's got 25 pages of closely typed references at the back. Oh no. And so I sat down one day, my heart sinking, going, oh, what's it about? Rats. It's about rats. Yay! This bloke looks at rats and has written a book saying why people get lost. And on page, I don't know what page, admittedly, rats aren't people. It may be that the way in which they find their way through environments is qualitatively different from how we might navigate. So I was rejuvenated, and I think this is what research is all about. Getting, beaten down and then standing back up and finding another direction to go. And that's the great thing about wayfinding, orientation. There's lots of different directions to go. So I'm quietly confident that I can write a thesis in about 3 or 4 or 5 years' time. Most people, most of the time, are much less orientated than they realise. And I think this is a really interesting direction that 2 or 3 people are going. Is it about orientation? Is navigation about whether you're orientated or not? Another one, Lynch, Kevin Lynch, is just sort of the man that introduced wayfinding term. The terror of being lost comes from the necessity of us to be orientated. And so you'll see that my research question has shifted away from, well, it's got both in actually. Being lost, but also orientation or disorientation. I'm more interested by getting people lost. At the Sign Design Society, we have Peter White. Have you heard of Peter White? Blind travel writer. Goes around the world, he's completely blind, travels around the world, writes about it, talks about it. Oh, what? So I'm blind, so what? And he was just basically saying, get used to it. I'm always lost. I quite like it. And I will never, ever, I will always get lost in an unfamiliar. But my brother's brilliant. And we were going, oh. And he's going, yeah, he's blind as well. And I'm going, oh, could I talk to you and your brother, please? He's going, oh, yes, of course. So another thing, on my to-do list was to talk to Peter White and work out how he has a terrible sense of direction, but his blind brother, has a good sense of what is his brother using? It's not sight. Is it smell? Is it sound? Is it? I will tell you next year. I'll come back and tell you. So what can designers learn from academics? What can academics learn from designers? I do believe that it's a two-way street. Is that 3? And how we do it professionally is very quickly, super quick, 2 days, done. I'll tell you why people get lost. And so I'm going to try and take that approach, but realising I maybe have to be a bit more rigorous than that. So this is me going around the Natural History Museum, maybe 2 or 3 days. Yeah, problem is this, isn't this? Honestly, you will always get lost at the Natural History Museum. Do not beat yourself up. It is absolutely illogical how it's laid out. So the best will in the world, our diagram won't help. So what I'm now starting to do is ask sign designers, architects to fill in one of various questionnaires. And one of the questions on there is, do you ever test your systems? It strikes me this is somewhere that, that me with some bit of time could do. No, the budget's never there and the clients can't be persuaded is the sort of response that I'm getting from that. So what I'm looking at is how we as academics write and read these papers, how we as designers quickly come up with some problem-solving solutions and work a way out how to do that, how to come up with some sort of strategies. So this is my question. A study of human wayfinding behaviour and spatial disorientation during task-based activities, so when you've got to get somewhere rather than you want to get lost and explore places, and it's an unfamiliar and it's a complex building. So I'm talking universities, hospitals, airports to some extent, but they don't tend to change quite so much. So that's me, and if you would like to be involved, I have lots of these. And I want to know your stories about where you got lost, how you got lost. If you've ever tried to solve wayfinding problems, please do get in touch. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.